Okay, here we go. As you remember, we reached to this strategic fit, which is mapping the implied uncertainty in a supply chain with the responsiveness spectrum. And we discussed that if in a supply chain, the level of uncertainty is low, so the supply chain should be designed to be a kind of efficient one. In the other side, if we have a high level of uncertainty, then to have a kind of a strategic fit, we need to come up and design a supply chain in a responsiveness manner. So efficiency in a certain issue, in a certain environment, and responsiveness in an uncertain environment. So that would be the concept of a strategy. And Fatma is saying that I noticed yesterday in our slide that are uploaded in Moodle, there is stuff missing. I don't understand. What do you mean that there are some stuff missing? Maybe I just, before each class, I usually review some slide. Maybe I have added some few slide over there. So, I mean, but don't worry. Each time that I'm uploading and actually I'm reviewing the slide, then I will upload the last version into the Moodle. So I will try to upload always the last version of the slide into the Moodle. Maybe I have uploaded those slides last week, but in this week maybe I have made some changes, but I will upload the new one in Moodle, maybe today or tomorrow. Okay, let me continue. So that was the last part of our discussion in yesterday class. And so this is the idea that in your supply chain, you have different stage, and in each stage, you should come up with an appropriate level of responsiveness or efficiency. So, I mean, we will have some examples in the next slide. I will explain that in the different stage of a supply chain, different level of responsiveness or efficiency could be desired. So we cannot say that across the whole supply chain, the level of responsiveness and efficiency will be similar. So let's go to see some kind of example here. The first example that I put here is related to IKE. I think most of you are familiar with this furniture retailer. I mean, the main manufacturer is based in Swedish, and they are providing some kind of furniture around the world, and they have some large store in almost 40 countries, but I don't think that they have a store in Oman. If you know, you can just correct me. And usually the customer who wanted to get furniture from IKE, they are looking for a kind of stylish furniture, but at least with a reasonable price. So, I mean, still the concern of the customer, the price is important. So as the price is important, the IKEA has decided to have a limited variety of style. So here the variety is low, but the point is then in each store, as I said, in 40 countries, they have one store. So in total, they have more than 40 stores in different countries. And so in each store, they have huge amount of inventory, but the variety is low. And as the variety is low, so we can, regarding the features that we have discussed in the previous class, as the variety of furniture is low, so the uncertainty will be also decreased. So the uncertainty is low as well. And their idea in IKE is that they will give the customers the furniture, the customers, from their inventory that has been stocked in the store. So actually they are using, the idea is that they are using that inventory to tackle the uncertainty that might happen in the supply chain. So here, the main contributor to absorb the uncertainty in the supply chain is the inventory that they are stocking in their stores. And what would be the advantage of this absorption of the uncertainty by stores in the different countries is that now for the manufacturing stage, they will have a kind of stable and predictable production amount, because most of the uncertainty is absorbed by the warehouses, by the stores. So when it comes to the manufacturing level, the level of uncertainty will be low. Why? Because they are sure. Easy to say. Just make it simple for yourself. They have some big warehouses, and the level of inventory in the big warehouses is high. So whatever would be the amount of demand, they are sure that they have some furniture in their warehouse to deliver to the customer. So by having huge amount of inventory in the warehouses in 40 countries, they are absorbing the uncertainty in that stage. So in the stage of manufacturers, they are located in Sweden or maybe some other countries, the level of uncertainty will be low. So this in that stage, the system is more predictable, and then we can expect that in the manufacturing stage, they should be more efficient. So in the retail stage, they are more responsive. Why? Because they have huge amount of inventory. Whatever is requested by the customer is supposed to be available in the store. And the level of manufacturing, they are supposed to be more efficient, because when the uncertainty is low, so the efficiency should be high. And one of the ways that they are going to make their manufacturing system efficient is locating their manufacturing plant in a low-cost country such as China, India, or some countries that the salary of the workers is low. So at the end, we can conclude that IKE provide responsiveness by having high level of inventory in their stores, and then they are absorbing that uncertainty which is coming from the customer. So in the stores, they are very responsive because they have a huge amount of inventory. And in the level of manufacturing and the suppliers, the level of uncertainty is low, so they are expected to be more efficient. And the other example, it's a kind of opposite example, is related to another furniture manufacturer. You see, the product is still the same, is still the sofa and furniture, but this time the example is related to England Incorporate, and this is located in they are providing thousands of furniture, and their strategy is make to order. So it means that they don't have a big inventory. They are waiting for the demand by the customer, and whenever there is a demand by customer, they just make to order. So this is their strategy. When the order is received, then the production of the furniture will be started. And they are promising to deliver the furniture in less than 3 weeks. So the delivery time is kind of not too short, but still is reasonable. But the good point for this company is that the variety of product is good. So the customer, they can select a wide variety of kind of furniture, and the response time is almost 3 weeks. So here the point is the furniture which is produced by England Inc., the price is so high. So they prefer to have low level of inventory in their warehouses. So in the retail stage, the level of inventory should be low. Why? Because the that they are producing is kind of expensive. So high level of inventory in their warehouse will bring a huge amount of cost to the company. So it means that if the level of inventory in your stores is low, so it means that your store is not capable of absorbing uncertainty. So in this regard, the uncertainty will be shifted to another stage. What would be the another stage? It would be passed to manufacturing site. And your manufacturing site needs to be capable and flexible enough to absorb that kind of uncertainty, because you have promised to your customer that you will provide the furniture in less than 3 weeks. And but the level of inventory in stores is not so high enough to be responsive in that level. So you will shift that uncertainty to your manufacturer side. And your manufacturer side should be flexible and capable enough to provide furniture in less than 3 weeks. So what's the conclusion here? The retailers should be efficient. Why? Because the retailers, they are absorbing less uncertainty. So as the retailer, they are absorbing less uncertainty, they should be more efficient. In the other side, in the manufacturing plant, the strategy is not efficiency. The strategy is high level of responsiveness. So for having a high level of responsiveness, it means that the manufacturing plant should be flexible enough. I mean, the capacity of the manufacturing plant should be enough to address a wide range of customer demand. So I hope that you have understood the concept of shifting uncertainty from one stage to another stage in a supply chain for the same kind of product, which is furniture. One example is IKE. They are, just as a very short review, they are putting huge amount of final product in retail stores, and in this regard, they are absorbing uncertainty in the retail store stage. So in the manufacturing side, they should be more efficient rather than responsiveness, because they are absorbing less uncertainty. As another example, England incorporates, they are keeping less level of inventory in the retailers. So to address the uncertainty which is coming from the customer, now you should have a responsive manufacturing site. And this idea, I mean, the general idea has been depicted in this figure. For example, supply chain 1, supply chain 2. In supply chain 1, as you can see, I mean, this is in this line, you have the level of uncertainty, the implied uncertainty for the supply chain. As you can see in supply chain 1, most of the uncertainty is absorbed by retailer. So here, retailer absorbing most of the uncertainty. So here, the retailer should be more very responsive. In the other side, you can see the manufacturer and supplier, they are absorbing less uncertainty. So our expectation from this stage, I mean, from supplier and manufacturer, is to be more efficient. The good example is related to IKE. The other case could be supply chain type 2. In supply chain 2, as you can see, retailers, as just look at these arrows over here, retailers, they are absorbing less amount of uncertainty. Maybe the level of inventory in your stores is not so high. And so in this regard, manufacturing, they should absorb most of the uncertainty. So manufacturing should be more responsive, and the retailer should be more efficient, because when there is less level of uncertainty, the efficiency should be high enough. As you can see here, the uncertainty could be shared between manufacturer and supplier. And that would be some quantitative discussion that we will have in the other chapter. So in this chapter, you have been just introduced the general idea that there is a kind of implied uncertainty imposed to the supply chain, and how we are going to share this uncertainty to be absorbed by different stage in a supply chain. And again, as a general idea, when the uncertainty is high, for example, here, uncertainty for the retailer is going to be high. So it should be so responsive. And if the level of uncertainty is low, so your side, either manufacturing or supplier, they should be efficient. And now I wanted to make a comparison between efficient and responsiveness in regarding different criteria. Usually the main criteria is related to the goal. So as we have been discussing so far, in efficient supply chain, the main goal is cost, is just minimizing the cost. That would be the main. But in a responsive supply chain, the main goal is providing the product to your customer very quickly. So that would be difference in terms of primary goal. How about the product design? In an efficient supply chain, we wanted to design a product at least acceptable level of quality, but the product cost should be minimized. In the other side, in a responsive supply chain, you may have a variety of product, because one of the criteria, if you remember, related to responsiveness is related to the variety of product. So in this regard, you postpone the differentiation in your product, or easy to say, the customization of the product will be postponed to the last stage. I think one good example is again IKE. If you have bought something from IKE, you can understand that there are kind of a modular package, and then when you put your order, those package will be assembled together based on your customization requirement, and then they will be delivered to you. So here, maybe responsiveness is going to be fulfilled through the postponement of the customization. But in efficient supply chain, we cannot expect that level of customization, because here the main concern of the customer is a kind of price or cost. What would be the pricing strategy in efficient supply chain? The main concern of your customer is money. So you cannot have a huge amount of margin. So the margin or profit is limited. But in a responsive supply chain, when your customer, they are caring more about the delivery time or the customization or quality, so then you can put more profit on your product. And this is the thing that I believe that most of you have experience in purchasing different items. You're just taking care of the cost. So then that would be related to a kind of maybe efficient supply chain. But when you are taking, I mean, the main concern is related to the quality or delivery time. So then in that regard, maybe you are a kind of customer of a responsive supply chain. In manufacturing strategy, again, if we want to be efficient, we need to reduce the cost. But in a responsiveness supply chain, we need to increase the capacity flexibility. Because for a responsiveness supply chain, you are supposed to be capable of addressing a wide range of demand. So here the capacity flexibility is important. Inventory strategy. In an efficient supply chain, we just want to minimize inventory as much as possible. But in this responsiveness supply chain, the idea is that to keep some inventory for the future. If there is a kind of surge in the demand, then you can tackle that amount of, unexpected demand. So usually in the responsiveness supply chain, we will keep some safety stock to tackle uncertainty. And about delivery time or lead time, in an efficient supply chain, again, we will try to reduce the lead time, but not at all the cost. So with a reasonable cost, we will try to reduce the lead time. But in a responsiveness supply chain, maybe you will use a very fast transportation mode, such as air transportation mode, to try to reduce aggressively the lead time. And then for sure, the cost of transportation will be so high. But in the other aspect, you have reduced the lead time. So in a responsiveness supply chain, the delivery time is much more important than, for example, transportation cost. And when it comes to supplier selection, if you are concerned about the efficiency, it means that your main concern is the cost. So your supplier selection will be the main weight will assign cost. But when you are dealing with a responsive supply chain, when you wanted to choose one supplier in your supply chain, so then maybe the delivery time and flexibility of your supply chain in providing the items on time will be more important rather than the cost. So that was one table to just make a comparison regarding different criteria for efficient and responsive supply chain. And okay, that was the final step in achieving a strategic fit. And as we have been discussing so far, we need to match between responsiveness and uncertainty in a supply chain if we want to get a strategy fit. And the last part of this chapter is related to expanding a strategic scope. So here we will start with lower scope, and then we will continue to extend to other scope. So in this regard, let me okay, the first scope that we want to consider is the intra-operation scope. And the main goal of this scope is minimizing the local cost in a supply chain. I will explain this one, and then at the end we will see that if this scope is a good scope, or we should extend our or we should expand our scope. So as you can guess from intra-operation scope, each stage of the supply chain will decide independently. So supplier will decide independently, manufacturing will decide independently, and then that would be the case. And let me just make one example here. For example, the transportation function in a supply chain, they will follow full truckload policy. And you are familiar with this policy. Full truckload, it means that whenever you want to send the order to customer, you will wait to reach to the amount of demand that the truck will be full. And then you will send the truck to the customers. And for sure, that will have a huge impact on the responsiveness, because if you are following this policy, then the delivery time will be lengthened. And then this is, have a bad impact on the responsiveness. In the other side, for example, for a sales function, if they are going to offer a kind of promotion or a kind of discount in their product, and this kind of promotion could have some effect on the production and the warehousing and transportation costs. Why there is a link between promotion and production? Because when you are going to offer a promotion, it means that you can expect some surge in the demand by the customer. So the production in your manufacturing site should be adjusted. The amount of inventory in your warehouse should be again increased, and there would be more transportation to provide the items for promotion. So you see that the decision of promotion will have some impact on the different stage. And the lack of alignment for sure will reduce the profit in a supply chain. So you can understand that this minimize local cost is not a good strategy. So because of that, we need to expand our strategic scope. If each function in a supply chain is going to make a decision, regardless of the impact on the other stage, so for sure we are not going to have a good level of surplus or profit for the whole supply chain. Maybe one stage will get some benefit, but for the whole supply chain, this is not going to be beneficial. And the other scope is intra-functional scope, which is trying to minimize total functional cost. So again, in this scope, all supply chain function, including sourcing, manufacturing, storage, transportation, all they should be aligned together to minimize total cost, total functional cost. And just a simple example, let's assume that you can find a low-cost supplier, but this supplier, the cost is high. So let's assume that you wanted to deliver some product to customers in Oman. You have found one supplier, which is in UAE, but the cost is higher than another supplier, which is based in China. The supplier cost in China is lower than the supplier in UAE. Let's assume that this is the case. But if you choose, a supplier in UAE, and then you can get the benefit of the transportation cost. And also the level of inventory could be lower because through the UAE, you can bring the product by some truck. So you don't need to receive the product in a kind of transit container, which is shipped by vessels from China to Oman. So rather than receiving the items in a huge bulk, you can just receive the items through a smaller part of demand. So what is the benefit here? Rather than dealing with a cheap supplier in China, you can select one expensive supplier from UAE, but then you can decrease the inventory and transportation cost. And at the end, you need to make a compensation between supplier cost, inventory cost, and transportation cost. So this is just one example. We cannot come up with a conclusion. Unless you do some quantitative calculation, in this example, we cannot make any justified decision. So to justify your decision, you need to compensate and make a trade-off between supplier cost, inventory cost, and transportation cost. And the point is, even in this scope, again, there might be some conflicting objects between different functions, such as marketing and sales. Marketing and sales department, usually they are focusing on the revenue. And in the other functions, in manufacturing and distribution department, they are focusing on reducing the cost. And in reality, they may face some conflict in their object, because marketing, they are just trying to give some maybe promotion to increase the sale. In the other side, maybe manufacturing side, they are preferring to have a kind of stable production system, and they are not so in favor of giving some promotion, because when you are defining a promotion, then you need to increase the capacity in some seasons, and then there would be extra demand for manufacturing and distribution. So you see that even in this scope, there might be some conflicting objective. So again, we need to expand this scope. If we expand this scope, the next level is the interfunctional scope. In this level, we are going to maximize the profit of our company. So again, all the strategy are developed in such a way that we are going to maximize the profit of the company. Again, I mentioned one example here. For example, for McMaster car, if you remember, it was a supplier of some maintenance product. Their competitive strategy was next day delivery. So whatever you are ordering, you can expect that tomorrow that order will be ready to be delivered to the customer. So what would be the functional strategy? High level of inventory. By having high level of inventory, then they can promise next day delivery. And then they can also increase the margin because then they will have some customer that they are paying for fast responsiveness, which is a kind of good achievement for this company. So here the objective of supplier is providing the customer a kind of convenience regarding the next day delivery, and also they are providing a wide variety of different and repairing product. And I think this is the last scope of a strategic scope, which is intercompany scope. And in this scope, that would be some discussion in the other chapters. In this scope, we want to maximize the supply chain surplus. In the previous scope, the main focus was just maximizing your company profit. And in this scope, which is a kind of ideal situation in a supply chain, the target will be trying to maximize this, the surplus or profit for whole supply chain. But this stage could be achieved if in each cycle, the supplier and customer, they work together and then they share the information to reduce the total cost in whole supply chain and to increase the supply chain surplus. If you remember from the cyclic view in a supply chain, in each cycle, you have in one side supplier, in the other side customer. So in each cycle, there should be a coordination and sharing of information to make a decision. So we will have a good example in one chapter related to inventory, that how supplier and one manufacturing site, they can share the information to reduce the inventory cost for whole supply chain, and then as the benefit for the whole supply chain, they can expect higher surplus. And the one example that I mentioned here is the coordination between Walmart and P&G plant. So this is a production as a supplier, and Walmart is a kind of retailer as the. So they are coordinating their promotion plan. So whenever there is going to be a kind of promotion by Walmart, that promotion plan is coordinated by PG manufacturing site. And because they wanted to make sure that the product will be produced in a good time, and the promotion will happen without resulting too much production or a kind of shortage in the market. So they will try to match between the capacity of the production in PG manufacturing site and also the promotion which is defined by Walmart. Then they can expect that the unsold inventory or the shortage will be minimized. I think this is kind of agile intercompany scope. Why the supply chain should be agile? Because usually in a supply chain, we are dealing with different stage, and this different stage, they are changing over the time. So let's assume that you have a manufacturing site, and your manufacturing site in one level, you are dealing with supplier, in the other level, you are dealing with some retailers. and there are some distributor and third-party logistic company between. And by the time they are changing their strategy, so you as the manufacturer needs to adjust your strategy with supplier, with retailers, with distributor. So your manufacturing side needs to be agile enough to understand the customer need over the time. And this is very important. Otherwise, your strategic fit could be good at the current situation, but if you are not going to adjust your strategic fit in the future, then you are going to lose your strategic fit at the future because you have not adjusted your capability regarding the changes which is happening during the time. And now we are going to finish this chapter by studying the challenges that might happen in a supply chain. I think I can finish this part in 5 minutes, and then we will have a short break, and then we will continue by chapter 3. So what would be the challenges to get a strategy fit? One of the challenges that many companies they are facing is a variety of the product and also shrinking life cycle. What is the life cycle? I mean, just a simple definition. When you are introducing a new product, there would be some stage. The first stage is a kind of infant stage that your product is at the earliest stage, just as the introduction to the market, and then your product is gradually reaching to the mature stage, and after a time, your product will be kind of outdated or old-fashioned product, and then that should be vanish from the market. So that would be 3 stages in a life cycle. And regarding the global competition in the market, the life cycle of the product is shrinking more and more. Whenever, I mean, maybe 20 or 30 years ago, when you produce and introduce a new product to the market, you could expect that this product is going to be competitive in the market maybe for, I don't know, 5 years. But now look at the life cycle of cell phone in the market. I mean, now, this year they are introducing a new cell phone. In less than 6 months or maximum 1 year, a new cell phone is introduced into the market. So you see the life cycle of the product is shrinking. And also the variety is so high. And all this variety and the shrinking life cycle is increasing uncertainty. So, and by increasing the uncertainty, then it would be more challenging to find enough time to achieve the strategic fit, because the time which is given to your supply chain is reduced because you need to adjust with the uncertainty, but the time is just shrinking. The competitor, they are not waiting for you. So that would be one of the challenge. And then the company may come up with different strategy. For example, Apple, they just decided to limit the variety of their product and try to introduce new product without having a variety in the product. So then they are just focusing on high demand product, but the level of variety is less. So then coordination in their supply chain is more, is less challenging. So this is the strategy of Apple. So regarding the, shrinking life cycle, they have decided to have a less product variety. The other challenges that I believe that most of you have heard about is globalization. So again, this globalization is bringing a huge amount of fluctuations in exchange rate, in global demand, in price of crude oil or whatever. So you can see that as a matter of globalization consequence, these are some fluctuations that we can see. And one example that I mentioned here is related to car industry or automobile industry. For example, in 2007 and 2008, there was a huge drop in the sales of vehicles in the US, specifically for the large vehicle. kind of SUV, four-wheel drives cars. And the supply chain, then they had to handle this uncertainty regarding the drop in the demand of SUV cars. And a successful example at that time was Honda company, because they have some kind of flexible plants, which give them this flexibility to produce ordinary car, small cars, and some kind of SUV. It's a kind of sport utility vehicles which is produced by Honda company. So in Honda plant, they have this flexibility to produce small and medium-sized vehicles together. And by having this, flexibility, they manage in tackling that uncertainty and drop in the market. And Honda was a good example of exploiting the flexibility of the plant to shift from one segment to another segment. The other challenges that I'm going to just review very fast is fragmentation of supply chain ownership. Previously, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when there was a supply chain, most of the stage belongs to one, for example, owner. So the supplier, manufacturer, and retailer all belongs to one owner. But this is not going to be the case right now. And now the vertical ownership has been fragmented to horizontal kind of ownership. And this is happening because now the supply chain is seeking to take advantage of supplier and customers' competency together. Here, the customer, it doesn't mean that the final customer. In each cycle, you have one supplier, one customer. So the competency that could be exploited between supplier and customer is encouraging the supply chain to break down the vertical ownership to a kind of horizontal ownership. But the new challenge is that this structure will be more difficult to be managed, because each supply chain, they have their own interests, they have their own policy and strategy, and then the coordination between these owners could be more challenging. The other challenge, as you have, I think, experienced this challenge, is related to the technology. And as you can see, the customer needs and the technology is changing very rapidly. Because of that, if you wanted to be successful, you need to redesign your supply chain. Because if you have been successful for a couple of years, maybe in the future, you will have some weaknesses. So again, you need to redesign your supply chain. And one example is related to Dell. Before 2005, their strategy was just selling some kind of a customized computer directly to the customer. If you remember from the previous lectures, before 2005, the customer, they were more willing to purchase customized computers. At that time, there was no such a laptop in the market. There was, but it was not in a huge demand. And then their strategy was built to order. Whenever there was an order from the customer, they could provide it in a customized manner. But after 2005, regarding the shift of the demand of the customer from computers to the laptop, then Dell was forced to redesign the supply chain and then to integrate with some retail stores in their supply chain. So rather than direct shipping to customer, they deliver some laptop to their retailers, and then through the retailers such as Emacs and some other retailers, they can provide their product to the final customer. And so you see that by changing, business environment, Dell has switched its supply chain from direct shipping to customer to retailer. And the last challenge is related to environment and sustainability challenge. And this is going to be discussed in one of the chapters in details. And I think you have heard about the sustainable supply chain, green logistic, and these are the topics that mainly they are dealing with the concern related to environment and also humanitarian issues whenever you wanted to design a supply chain. If you are also concerned regarding the environment and humanitarian issues, so it means that your supply chain is going to be kind of sustainable. So previously, maybe 20 or 30 years ago, the main goal was just reducing the cost. But nowadays, you can see even in the news that green concern is getting more attention from the designer of the supply chain. Okay, this is the summary of the chapter 2. We have understood why we need to achieve a strategic fit. And as you have seen, to get a strategic fit, you need to make an adjustment between supply chain strategy, which is the capability of your supply chain, and competitive strategy. And if you remember, in competitive strategy, we are defining our customers' priority. And for today, we see some kind of scope of supply chain, how we can expand the scope of strategic functions in a supply chain, and what are the main challenges in a supply chain. Okay, guys, now I think we can have a kind of break. Now it's 11:20. Let's back at 11:25. And then we will start chapter 3. I'm going to stop recording right now. Okay, chapter 3, supply chain drivers and metrics. So in these chapters, we are going to identify the major drivers in a supply chain. There are 6 drivers. We are going to study each one. And then we will discuss the role of each drivers, how we can use those drivers to get a strategic fit. And then we will define some key metrics that will track the performance of each driver. So introducing the drivers, the role of each drivers, and introducing some key metrics to see what is the performance of each driver. So these are the discussion for this chapter. So the driver of supply chain, we need to identify the drivers of supply chain, because by having these drivers, we want to minimize the cost, because we wanted to have an efficient and at the same time responsiveness supply chain. So trying to have an efficient and responsiveness supply chain is the goal of these drivers. So let's start with the first driver, is facility. I think you have been familiar with the concept of facility in logistic management course. And the main definition of facility is physical buildings, physical location in your supply chain. And in this physical building, you can produce something. Usually they are production site or a storage site. For example, supplier and manufacturer, they are usually a kind of production site. And the distribution centers and retailers, they are a kind of storage site. So no matter it's production or storage, they are a kind of facility. So whenever we are talking about the facility in a supply chain, all those physical location could be considered as a facility. And the decision related to facilities, such as the role of facility, location, capacity, how much they are flexible, they will have a huge impact on the performance of your supply chain. Just as a simple example here, Amazon, they just increased the number of their warehouse, and the reason for that was increasing the responsiveness. So when you have more warehouse closer to your customers, so then you can expect higher responsiveness. In the other side, best retailer, they wanted to increase efficiency because they realized that the amount of cost in their retailers is so high. So they just decided to many retail facility to have a better efficiency. So you see, just by changing the number of facility, you can kind of compensate between responsiveness and facility cost. The other drivers, first I'm just introducing the drivers, and then we will study the role of each drivers in more details in this chapter. The other drivers is inventory. So what are the inventory in a supply chain? Any kind of raw materials, um, purchase part that should be assembled, working process, and finished product. All they could be considered as inventory. And by changing the inventory policy, the efficiency and responsiveness of your supply chain could be changed. One example here, for example, for Grainger, they wanted to have a responsive supply chain. So the amount of inventory in their warehouse is high enough. In the other side, so you can expect that the efficiency is low. So in these retailers, stock is so high, so it means that responsiveness is good, but efficiency is reduced. Zara, as you are familiar with this brand, they wanted to have a shortened new product, to introduce new product rapidly, and also they wanted to shorten the replenishment lead time. So it means that if you visit one stores of Zara, maybe in 2 weeks, if you visit the same store, you see a new product has been replenished in the shelves. And they wanted to be a still responsiveness, but they wanted to have a low level of inventory. If you remember from the previous chapter, if in your retailers you wanted to have a low level of inventory, it means that your retailers, they are not capable enough to absorb uncertainty. So that uncertainty is shifted to other states, such as warehouses or manufacturing site. So maybe you can keep a huge amount of inventory in your warehouses, or maybe still you wanted to keep level of inventory low in your warehouses. So then your manufacturing site should be flexible enough to absorb that uncertainty. So I'm saying that inventory policy will have a huge impact on efficiency and responsiveness of our supply chain. The other drivers is transportation. Again, you have been familiar with the concept of transportation mode in logistic. What is the transportation? It's kind of logistic definition. Whenever you wanted to shift kind of inventory, even raw materials, working process, or final product, from one point to another point, that would be transportation and logistic. You have studied that there are different transportation mode and with different performance characteristics. And again, your decision regarding the transportation mode will impact on the responsiveness and efficiency of your supply chain. As one example, let's assume that you are a manager in a mail order catalog company, that you are providing some kind of catalog for your customers. If you use the fastest transportation mode, such as FedEx, so in that regard, it means that you are providing in a short delivery time. So it means that your supply chain is more responsiveness. But in terms of efficiency, maybe it's not, because then it's imposing huge amount of cost. Because if you know, the FedEx is a kind of carrier that moving items, but with a fast transportation mode with a huge cost. So again, which kind of transportation mode you are choosing will affect on the responsiveness and efficiency. And also transportation policy. For example, a full truckload or low truckload, they will have impact on these two criteria. The other drivers is information, the data which is shared between facility And this data will include the inventory level, the transportation, the cost, the prices, the customer demand. All this data and the analytic tool that you are using for making decision in your supply chain will go to this driver. And in the literature, information has been recognized as the biggest driver in the supply chain. Why? Because it's kind of coordinating tools will joining different stage of, different drivers in a supply chain. So all the other drivers in supply chain, they are connected to each other through the information driver. One example regarding one successful supply chain is 7-Eleven in Japan, and they have a very advanced information system. By having this ERP advanced information system, they can define a good match between amount of supply and amount of demand from the customer. So they can coordinate the production level, they can coordinate the transportation decision in an economy of scale level to keep the cost low, but still be responsiveness regarding the customer demand. So how this two achievement could be fulfilled? By having a strong information system. And as you know, you are going to also pass one specific course, which is showing the importance of information system as the biggest driver in a supply chain. The other drivers is sourcing, and by sourcing we are meaning that which part of supply chain is doing which task, or easy to say, who is doing what? That would be sourcing. Who is doing what? So in a supply chain, you have different activities such as production, storage, transportation, information system, and so on. And who will be responsible for doing which activity? That would be the driver of sourcing. And again, that will affect on responsiveness and efficiency. Again, I put one example here, which is related to Motorola. They have outsourced their production manufacturers to China. So as a matter of, production costs in China regarding the low-level worker salary, so then the efficiency is improved because the production cost is reduced by shifting the source of manufacturing to China. But the point is, in the other side, the responsiveness may suffer because when the manufacturing site is in China, and then if you wanted to deliver the item to Europe, then the lead time will be longer. So again, you see that changing the sourcing policy will impact on the responsiveness and efficiency. The supplier that you are selecting is decided in your sourcing policy. As we have been discussing so far in this class, maybe you can find a cheap supplier in China, but the lead time is so long. It's a matter of some couple of months. But if you find the expensive supplier in UAE or even in Oman, so the price might be higher, but then you can expect a better responsiveness because then the lead time is reduced. The other drivers in supply chain is pricing. So, the definition of pricing is clear. How much you are going to charge your customers for the product and services that you are providing through your supply chain. So what is the price of your product and services? This is the pricing. And directly or maybe indirectly, that affect the behavior of your customer. And here I just put one example. Let's assume that there is one transportation company, and based on the delivery time, the transportation costs will be different. For example, you wanted to purchase something from Europe, you can order it by maybe by air transportation mode or through some kind of container vessel, container ship. And for sure, if you order by air transportation mode, that would be much more expensive compared to other transportation mode. So here the delivery time is, defined based on the transportation mode that you are choosing. And let's assume that you have two customers. Customer A, efficiency is important. What is efficiency? It's cost. Customer B care about the responsiveness. So it means that they are more care about the, appropriate of the lead time. So if I ask you which customer will choose which solution, so here we have two solutions. We can order early. It means that you can order now, maybe 3 months earlier. You can order 3 months earlier, and then your product could be shipped by a vessel from Europe to Oman. So it means that if you choose solution one, you are a kind of customer A, because you are more concerned about the efficiency. Efficiency is the matter of cost concern. But if you wait and just order whenever it's required, so it means that you are a kind of customer B, and your main value is responsiveness. So again, you see that between efficiency and responsiveness is the strategy that you are choosing, and based on that strategy, the transportation would be, decided. So that was one just simple example. I mean, the pricing strategy will have a different impact on the supply chain. And here I just put one framework for structuring the drivers. I just give some explanation over here. As you can see, usually in a supply chain, we will start by competitive strategy. By defining the competitive strategy, it means that we are understanding the customer priority and what would be the advantage and competitive features of our supply chain in the market to get some customers. And in the other side, you need to develop the strategy of your supply chain based on your capability. And in this regard, you need to decide if your supply chain is going to be more efficient or more responsiveness. As you remember, you have discussed responsiveness and efficiency in designing supply chain strategy based on the uncertainty that you are facing in a supply chain. If it's a kind of low level of uncertainty, so the supply chain should be efficient. If you are facing high level of kind of uncertainty, the supply chain should be responsiveness. And to reach to this supply chain strategy, you have 6 drivers. What we are understanding from this category, we are understanding that 3 drivers, they are considered as the logistic drivers or logistical drivers, and 3 drivers will be considered as cross-functional drivers. So cross-functional drivers and logistical drivers. What are the logistical drivers? Facility, inventory, and transportation. What are the cross-functional drivers? Information system, sourcing, and pricing. If you wanted to differentiate between logistical drivers and cross-functional drivers, it's not difficult. Just the logistical drivers is related to the kind of producing items, storing items, and it's all related to the product, facility, inventory, and transportation. But for cross-functional drivers, as you can see, it's related to making connection between functions of your supply chain. Information system is coordinating all the operation in your supply chain. Through the sourcing, you are just determining which company is doing which activity. And through the pricing, you are defining the price of transportation. You define the price of warehousing system. You are defining the price of production in different facility regarding different production line, different city, and so on. So in total, we have 6 drivers. 3 of them, they are logistical drivers. 3 of them, they are cross-functional drivers. They should be coordinated. And there is one case study related to Walmart. I mean, that would be a kind of self-study that you will study later on. You can see that how Walmart has been successfully managing, coordinating these drivers together to achieve responsiveness and efficiency simultaneously to fulfill the supply chain strategy. Still, we have 10 minutes, so I'm going to continue by facility drivers, and then after 10 minutes, I will stop because I have another webinar. So for facility, have seen in today's lectures, facility, they are physical buildings, physical location that either you are producing something or you are storing something. And I think you can easily understand that when you are if you wanted to increase responsiveness, that could happen by easily increasing the number of facility or making or increasing the capacity of your facility, or even inside your facility, rather than one production line, you can have 3 production line, which is bringing more flexibility. So any of this option, I mean, increasing number of production plant, number of or increasing the capacity of plant, defining some overtimes, or by hiring some more employee in your production system, all they will increase your responsiveness, because then you can provide more product for the customer with a higher range and with a higher variety. But in the other side, it's coming with a cost. So here, increasing responsiveness through the facility drivers, it means that you need to, pay some cost. So as a general conclusion, we can say that if we increase the number of facility, so for sure, the facility cost will increase, because for each specific facility, you need to spend some investment, you need to invest some budget to open that facility. And also inside the facility, you will have some inventory. Again, the inventory cost will be increased. But in the other side, transportation cost and response time will be reduced. Why this is happening? When you have, for example, one facility, then from that facility, you need to have transportation to kind of different customers. So the amount of travel, the total travel distance will be higher. But when you have many facility, for example, if you have many distribution center and retailers close to the customers, then the transportation cost from those retailers and DC to the final customer will be reduced, and the transportation cost will be also impacted. We will have some kind of mathematical models to see what would be the trade-off between transportation cost, facility cost, and also response time when we are studying chapter 5, which is related to designing a supply chain network. But just as an introduction, keep in mind that when you are increasing the number of facility, when you are opening new facility, you need to pay some money. But in the other side, the transportation cost to customers and the response time will be reduced. And this is the case even for increasing flexibility or capacity. Again, that will bring some cost, but the response time will be reduced. And finding a kind of appropriate trade-off between facility costs, inventory costs, transportation costs, and response time will be discussed in details in chapter 5. And also, after finishing some chapters from this course, we will have some sessions to learn about any logistics software. And then through that, any logistics software, I will show you some example to see how we can change the number of facility, and then we can see easily the impact on the transportation cost in terms of travel distance, or would be the impact on the response time. And then the response time will be measured in terms of maximum distance to our customers. For a facility, you need to decide what would be the role of your facility. Is it going to be a flexible facility, or is it going to be a dedicated facility, or a kind of combination of both? A flexible facility, it means that you have flexibility to produce huge variety of the product, but the efficiency will be lower. But when it comes to a kind of a dedicated facility, it means that you have designed one facility dedicated to one specific product. So the variety is less, but the system, the production site is more efficient. So when the variety is less, it means that the responsiveness is also low. And the other role that you need to decide if are we going to have a kind of flow shop system or job shop system. You will have one course which is material flow course, facility design, and in that course you will study flow shop system and job shop system. But just as a very short introduction, I will tell you that in flow shop system, we will have a kind of production line system. So they are a kind of dedicated system. The flexibility is low, but the amount of production could be in the mass level. For job shop system, the flexibility is higher. You can produce simultaneously a huge variety of product, but the production cost will be higher compared to the production line. So, I mean, the role of your facility should be decided when we are going to design a manufacturing, when we are going to design a supply chain. I think this is also an open area for research, because I have not seen many research in this regard to decide simultaneously about the type of production system in one system, and also the structure of a supply chain. Recently, I have published 2 papers. If you just Google it, you can find those papers that I have designed. Kind of supply chain, including different cellular manufacturing system. But I believe that still there are some open area in this research. And also for your warehouse and DC, is it going to be a kind of cross-dock facility, and or is it going to be a kind of regular or ordinary warehouse? As you have studied in logistic management course, in cross-dock warehouse or DC, you are receiving some product from supplier without storing for a long time. You are just unloading, maybe disassembling the packages, opening the packages, distributing those modules to some kind of relevant modules together, put them in a new package, maybe some sort of labeling and some sort of maybe counting, and then distributing by outbound logistics to the final customer. So that would be one decision for warehouse and DC. Is it going to be a cross-dock facility or a kind of a storage facility that you are going to keep items for a long period of time? So these are the roles that you need to decide for each facility: flexible, dedicated, the type of production system. Type for warehouse, is it going to be cross-dock or storage? Then we have the location, capacity, and facility-related metrics. Time left. For the location, I think this question is easy. Where will be the location of our facility? And that would be the main question that we are going to answer in chapter 5 when we are going to design a supply chain. Finding the location of our facility, either manufacturing system or warehouses or DC, will be the main question regarding this one. So that would be the main idea. And then also answering this question, are we going to deal in a centralized or decentralized supply chain? If it's going to be centralized, so it means that you will have one big plant or you will have one big warehouse. So then you can expect some economy of scale because you are paying only the investment cost for one plant. But in the other side, the transportation cost will be higher, and then the service level might not be in a good level. Or maybe you are preferring to of decentralized supply chain. So in a decentralized supply chain, you will have several plants, several DC, just as a simple example. So then again, a trade-off between responsiveness and efficiency should be considered over here. And there are some other issues such as macroeconomic factor that should be considered in location problem. The quality of employee, maybe you are going to produce a very sophisticated product and you know that the salary of employee in one country is low, but maybe the quality of workers in that country is not good. So you cannot establish your manufacturing plant in a country which doesn't have a good quality of workers. So this is one important thing. And also the infrastructure is important. Maybe you can find the cheap land in one area, but maybe the infrastructure such as energy supply, water supply, road accessibility is not good. So just availability of infrastructure will be an important factor regarding the location problem. Proximity to customers is important. If you just open one, for example, retail store, which is so far from customers, so then it's not going to be a good decision. And there are some other issues that could be considered in a location problem. But in this course, mainly we are focusing on the making a trade-off between opening cost of facility, transportation cost, inventory cost, and responsiveness cost through some mathematical model that we will study in chapter 5. And the other decision will be the capacity of our facility. Is it going to be a small plant, medium-sized plant, or big plant? If it's going to be big plant, maybe we can expect some economy of scale, but again, how about the transportation cost? If it's going too much big, so excess capacity, it means that, we can provide a wide range of demand, but that would be costly because a big plant, it means that you have enough capacity to fulfill any amount of demand, but maybe it's an efficient decision. Maybe less capacity could be more efficient, but in terms of responsiveness, maybe it's not a good strategy. Again, finding a good level for your production facility and for your warehouse capacity, these are some questions that should be answered. There are some metrics over here, such as capacity. By capacity, you can track the performance of your facility, the maximum amount that you can process in your production site or into your warehouses. The utilization level is another important metrics, which is how much you are using from your facility capacity, because there is a nominal capacity, but actual plan, maybe the level of utilization will be lower. The other metrics is related to processing time, setup time, downtime, idle time. But guys, as I'm approaching to the webinar time, I'm afraid that I have to stop here. And Then just remember that we have reached to the facility drivers, the related metrics, and by next session, next week, we will continue by another matrix, which is inventory. So just keep in mind that we have reached to inventory, and then we will continue from that drivers, and hopefully by next week we will finish chapter 3, and then we can start chapter 5. Okay, guys, is there any question for today class? And I should say thank you to our student, Ayesha, Al-Anud, Al-Ghaliya, Al-Marwa, Amna, Asil, Azami, Ishar, Fatma, we have 2 Fatma, Haya, Hind, Hamid, Isra, Jumana, Maryam, Misa, Nada, Raida, Safa, Sara, we have 2 Sara, Shahla, Shaza, Taif. And yes, I will upload the PowerPoint for chapter 2 and for chapter 3. But for chapter 3, maybe there could be some kind of modification. I think it's better always, whenever I'm finishing one chapter, then it's better to download that chapter. Now I'm going to stop recording.